Welcome, I'm Reverend Jayne Coley, and today's talk is how to surrender, discover faith and peace. And as usual, I want to start with a quote, and this quote is by Ernest Holmes, and he says, "As we come to surrender all littleness and surrender all fear and doubt, that great river of life flowing through the mind of God will renew our vigor, remake our strength, ennoble our being, heal our bodies, and bring peace to our hearts." So I want to start with this story. I arrived at hospice the other day to visit my mother-in-law, Joyce, with my son. And Grandma Joyce, she looked extremely peaceful, angelic in her face. And this made me ponder, can I access this peaceful, surrendered state right now? And the answer that popped in was, yes, you can. I don't need to be dying in order to realize that this peace is something that comes with surrendering. And simultaneously, while I was at hospice, I looked down my phone. I was constantly getting these texts about a real estate transaction, and it was getting really bumpy. After coming in from seeing Grandma Joyce, I thought, I'm going to surrender this real estate transaction. I'm going to give it up right now to God. I'm going to include the anxiousness of the buyers, the bank, and the other mortgage company. And I realized that I also had to surrender my own attachments around this transaction. And I just let it go and I surrendered it to God. And within 10 minutes, a solution just popped in. And I was like, great, there's my answer. And it was beautiful. So I now remember my moment in time immersed in that peace with Grandma Joyce as a reminder to surrender. And solutions come when we're willing to just let it go and give it up to God. And I know that when I'm resisting or I'm pushing or fighting or trying to do something my way, that it's outside of myself. It's a circumstance that's out there, a condition. And I'm actually fighting my own divinity when I do that. So just know that when we fight against something outside of us, we're fighting against our own divinity. And why would I ever want to do that? Charles Fillmore says that the inner spiritual life is protected from the outer, coarser consciousness, Christ indwelling. There is a spiritual nucleus in each of us. And I love that. There's a spiritual nucleus in each of us. Marianne refers to surrendering as stop fighting the world and start to love the world instead. That is just like so beautiful to me too, that we can let go of this fighting that we do within ourselves. And I'm still learning to spiritually surrender. And I keep realizing that I'm not the one in charge. And God is definitely the one that is in charge. And this creative process of surrender, it's not about control. It's about letting go. And that doesn't mean not doing anything. But spiritual surrender is also not something about defeat. It's something far more powerful than I can create myself. It's a letting go and yet still listening for guidance. Do you remember the story in the Bible where Peter steps out of the boat and he starts to walk towards Jesus? And if I remember the story, as Peter steps out of the boat, he sees Jesus, he calls out, but simultaneously this big gust of wind comes and he gets distracted by that gust of wind, that turmoil that's kicking and going on around him. And right then when he starts to focus on that, he cries out, "Help!" And as soon as he cries out, "Help," you'll remember that Peter sinks. And in metaphysical terms, Peter to me is a great reminder, and a great reminder to all of us, that when we focus on the turmoil going on in our lives, the outside conditions, the storms, the seeming windy events in our life, that we lose sight of Jesus, which is our Christ consciousness. And some would say that Peter failed, once he sank, when he focused on the wind rather than focusing on keeping his focus on Jesus. And I would say that at least he got out of the boat and tried and walked toward Jesus. The other 11, they didn't even get out of the boat. So letting go, trusting, and having faith 100% inside to this inner guidance system, our GPS, this Christ consciousness, I believe that's what the story of Peter is about and the boat. And I can totally relate to Peter because I think everything's going along really perfectly, and then a snag shows up, and it's something outside of me. And I get distracted, whether it's seeing lack in my progress or lack in my results. And yes, I do get distracted, focusing on what's going on around me on a daily basis. And I'd love to say that I immediately refocus my intention and have 100% faith. But yes, sometimes I do, and I'm working on it. I believe it's imperative that every day we greet each day with the fresh faith, and we just practice this returning to surrendering and bringing that and focusing on that Christ consciousness and walking across whatever water or situation that is for you, whatever that crosses our path for that day, whatever the water is for us. And each day I get stronger and more equipped to surrender, trusting this own inner GPS system, my guidance system, this Christ consciousness. And my faith is strengthening, and my inner peace is a part of that. It's a part of that whole equation. And for me, my greatest teachers are my teenagers, who seem to present these scenarios generally on a daily basis where I get to strengthen this element of faith and create this trusting inside and coming where I have to let it go, where I don't know the solution, and yet I still have to keep that inner peace and follow through for my guidance rather than all this that's going on in their world around them and the dramas that they bring forth, so that I can come from that higher place to support them. And I've learned many times the hard way. God's way is always the way. It's the way of flow, the way of prosperity. It's the way to health and vitality. You know, money shows up, clients appear seemingly out of the blue. And I believe that I get better working with my teenagers when I also let go and follow God's way. So by spiritually surrendering, we are more powerful. There's no doubt we're more powerful. And we go within and discover that something so grand, so great is actually leading us. And it's leading our life, and it can be more joyful and abundant than we ever dreamed possible. And I would like to share a reminder for you for this week about surrendering with 3 simple words. Open, listen, act. Hola, open, listen, act. So the open, to open by going to prayer. The L, to listen in that place of faith by surrendering and trusting that we have this inner GPS, this guidance system. And that when we are in that, spiritually surrendering to something higher that's within, that there's a voice that speaks this wisdom way beyond our rational minds. And then the third word, act. Then we act, we take action on the guidance that we receive. And sometimes that means that we just sit in a state of peace. And that's what I'm learning more and more. Sometimes it's do nothing but be peaceful. And that's a lot to do, to just sit in a state of grace and peace. So hola, open, listen, act. And I want to close with just a couple of simple affirmations. So if you can just close your eyes, take a deep breath in your heart area, just melt into that oneness that you already are. And I'm going to say these affirmations, if you could just repeat them. I surrender to love. I surrender to love. I surrender to peace. I surrender to peace. I surrender in faith to answers found within. I surrender. Thank you. I love you. Have a blessed day.